now got Brett Friedlander, friend of the show here from the Women's and Star News. So, Brett, thanks for being with us again.
Anytime, guys.
Okay, well, we'll just get right to it, and we'll just, with basketball obviously coming to a close with the ACC, with Virginia losing to Michigan State, just talk a little bit about the year that, or the NCAA tournament the ACC had. You know, obviously no Tobacco Road teams with Duke, North Carolina, and NC State all falling out in the early rounds of the tournament.
Well, I think the biggest statement on how this season went and how the tournament went is that Clemson and Florida State were the last teams standing in the ACC. Think about that for a moment.
Basketball.
Yeah, right. It was the NIT, but they were the only teams left, and so clearly it was not a vintage ACC season, and especially after the whole hype of the greatest conference ever and the whole expansion thing. It's probably one John Swofford and the folks up in Greensboro would like to forget. But the good news is that I think that you've got help on the way. Duke's got the best recruiting class in the country coming, and it's looking like Jabari Parker may stay around. North Carolina, although it did lose James Michael McAdoo to the NBA draft yesterday, has got a great recruiting class. A kid who was named co-MVP of the McDonald's All-America game yesterday. Syracuse looks to be in pretty good shape. Virginia's got a lot of guys coming back. You're adding Louisville into the mix next year. So I think that, it's a good place to start. It's not the way any of us wanted it to go, but, I don't think that it's cause for panic.
Right, and just talk a little bit about that, the Duke Mercer game, if you were at that one, and
Yep.
Your reaction to that. Obviously, Mercer, the school out of Macon, Georgia, they look like, it was incredible, though. 5 seniors on that team. Just talk about, how that game went, and just kind of were the Duke fans, they had to have been just stunned.
Yeah, they were. And I tell you what, you kind of hit on really the main point of that game, the 5 seniors. You can have great freshmen, and during the regular season, it's a situation where those guys can dominate. And it's not just Duke. Look at the Kansas situation with Wiggins. You get these guys, and they play great, and they're very talented, but they're also very inexperienced. And the NCAA tournament, the postseason in general, is a time for guys with experience, and especially upperclassmen. If you've got them, then you can go a long way. And it showed during the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game against Duke. And there was some panic. Jabari Parker's fired up a couple of shots that he probably shouldn't have. The Mercer kids played with poise. They knew what to expect from each other, and they got it done. That having said, a team with the kind of talent of Duke should never lose to a team with the kind of talent of Mercer. And it was a shocking game, and it kind of exposed some of the weaknesses, some of the flaws that Duke had all season. And one of them was that, as good as Jabari Parker and Rodney Hood were, and they were very good, they really never played off each other. If you notice, they never really had, other than maybe the Carolina game at the end of the regular season and maybe 1 or 2 others during the rest of the year, they really never had a great game at the same time. It was one or the other, and they never really played off each other. And I think that kind of showed. And then they both had a bad game, in that loss to Mercer, and they couldn't overcome it. Right,
and it was a really intriguing game, one of the best games of the tournament so far. And moving up to Raleigh and NC State, that was just epic kind of collapse, I guess you could say. They really had control of that ball game, and probably got to leave some NC State fans still scratching their head about what happened there.
Well, yes and no. It's like they've seen it before. That's the signature move of the Wolfpack. Is just playing great for a certain period of time and just not being able to close it out. But yeah, their experience showed. Maybe they had some fatigue issues, but you got to make free throws. And it's interesting because Clemson has traditionally been one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the ACC. This year they were the best, and you see how it helped them in the late stages of games. Well, in this particular case, not being able to make a free throw cost NC State dearly. But, I think NC State is also a program on the rise. Even if T.J. Warren decides to go to the NBA, and he's supposed to announce his decision on Tuesday, all indications are that he's going to leave. That's a very young team. And, other than the big man Jordan Vandenberg, they'll all be back. They've got a really talented transfer named Trevor Lacey from Alabama coming in. And so, I guess you chalk that up as a learning experience to a team that really kind of was fortunate to be in the NCAA tournament and actually won a game. So as bad as it was, that could have been a lot worse. Let's put it this way. I think Duke's loss was much worse than what happened to NC State against St. Louis. Right,
and looking at Duke again, what do you make of, I guess Wojo's his nickname, going to Marquette? Do you like the hire there?
Absolutely. I think it was time. It's one of those deals where, and it's kind of interesting the timing of this, too, because Wojo had been there for 15 years. And, he was waiting for the right opportunity. And I think that, maybe he was thinking that if he was the last man standing there, maybe if Coach K retires in a couple of years, then he would get the gig by default, especially since no one else on the coaching tree has really distinguished themselves. Johnny Dawkins got to the NCAA tournament this year. Tommy Amaker has had some success at Harvard, but he also got fired at Michigan and had some issues with the NCAA as well. And so I think Wojo may have thought, if I stick around here, I could get this job. And when Coach K came out last week and said that he planned on coaching at least 5 more years, maybe Wojo decided it's time for me to leave the nest and get a program on my own. And, Marquette is not a bad situation for him. It's a basketball-first school that has got a really good tradition. Buzz Williams left it in good shape. And it's a place where he can go and win. And so I think that it's one of those deals where, I think he felt like for his future's sake, it was time to go. And this was the right move. It just seems to be a very good fit. And I think he's going to be a good head coach because, he's done a lot of scouting. He's done a lot of the coaching. I mean, he handles, the halftime and post-game interviews on TV for Coach K. And so it's not like he's getting into uncharted territory here.
Right, totally agree with that. I think he'll be a really good coach at Marquette. And looking at, obviously Virginia won the regular season and the conference tournament. Pretty incredible what they did there, and just the way they played. Such a team, and really played hard for one another. But obviously drew a tough matchup with Michigan State and fell out in the Sweet 16. What do you make of the year that they had?
Well, they had a great year because even though they were picked to finish 4th in the league, I don't think anybody saw that coming, especially after they lost by 35 at Tennessee in late December. I mean, it was what's wrong with Virginia? Then they got into the ACC, and I think that loss was really kind of the catalyst for them in that Tony Bennett saw that he was really kind of holding them back offensively, and they couldn't just win the games on defense alone. Because when a team, got hot or the defense wasn't as tough as it usually is, they needed to be able to score points. So we kind of turned them loose a little bit. And I think that really kind of set the tone for the rest of the season. Virginia with that defense is always going to be in games. And the fact that they've got now guys who can put the ball in the net, Brogdon's coming back. London Parentis, the point guard, is only a freshman. He'll be back. Anthony Gill, the transfer from South Carolina, I think is a star getting ready to come into his own next year, especially with Joe Harris and N'Keal Mitchell being gone. His role will expand. I think that what Tony Bennett has done there is he's built a program rather than just a team, a group that came up together, sort of like Mercer, 5 seniors, and they've all played together, and this is the climax that they built for. I think what you see is that he has built himself a nice program, and I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they're going to be a real factor next year, and the fact is that it's tough to score against them, and that gets into to opponents' heads, and I really like them as being one of the top teams. And again, that goes to the improvement of the league as a whole next year. This year you had 4 teams that really were good. And if they can stick around, and then you can keep like having the Clemsons and the NC State and maybe Miami, taking another step forward, that strengthens the middle of the league. And I think that Virginia is a key to that happening.
Right, totally agree. I think that's what you're kind of seeing here with Brownell at Clemson, trying to, with that defensive mentality, what he's trying to do here. And going into that, what do you think about, obviously, well, I know this was a long time ago, but that call, you were there at the ACC tournament, that call with the call on one side and the call not on the other, I thought that was, I guess that was just a little bit of Tobacco Road. But and then what do you think about KJ McDaniels going to the NBA? Would you think he should, or should he stay around one more year at Clemson?
Well, I would advise him not to, and the reason I would advise him not to is because he's kind of a guy who has been looked upon as a great shot blocker, and a guy with maybe limited offensive skills. Well, now you see those offensive skills starting to bloom, and I think the scouts are starting to take notice, but I'm not sure that they're convinced yet. And I think that to come back and have another year like he did this year, especially if he can kind of take it to the next level and really become a leader and carry this team into the NCAA tournament, I think he can only help his draft stock. I think that he needs to show the scouts that he's a more well-rounded player than they remember seeing, and that he's a guy that is not just kind of a one-trick pony, and you can bring him in and make him he can be worthy of a lottery pick. Coach K last week said something that was really interesting, and he said that it's one thing to be a first-round pick, but if you're not one of the top few picks where they've got a lot of money invested in you, you got to get it done quickly, because they've got an option after 2 years to keep you or to set you free. And if they set you free after that first 2 years, if they're not really pleased with your development or think that you're going to be able to help them long term, they're not going to sink a lot of money into you. And now all of a sudden you're kind of a nomad, and your career could end up being very short. And so I think you've got to take that into account. Yeah, unless you're really financially in need, that extra year for KJ, I think will not only make him more money, but I think it's going to buy him a lot more security once he gets to the league. And not only that, but the program really needs for him to stay. And this is a program that's on the verge of really doing something special. And, one of the problems with Clemson since Brad took over is that it seems like the best players always, kind of get it right there as their seniors. And by the time that they're really starting to come into their own, they're gone. And now this year, for a change, you've got guys like KJ, like Landry Ninoco, like Rod Hall, who you see that improvement, and you see that that they are nowhere near as good as they're going to be, and they've got another year to come back and really kind of develop and kind of really accomplish their ceiling. Well, if he were to leave now, basically you'd be back in that same boat. And so I think if KJ sticks around, it could be a real springboard for not only next year, but for the future of this program.
Right, totally agree with that. And before we let you get out of it, just talk about a few of those coaching hires with Buzz Williams at Virginia Tech and then Danny Manning. I thought they were really good, really what those programs needed to do in terms of getting back to where they once were. Wake Forest, it wasn't that long ago. They had Tim Duncan and was #1 in the nation. Then Virginia Tech had success with Seth Greenberg. And then also the latter part of that question, who do you like in the Final Four, and I guess North Texas, what they're calling it, but it's Dallas. So
it's funny. My brother lives in Arlington. He's complaining that they don't want to call it Arlington. They don't want to call it Arlington. But as far as the hires are concerned, I was shocked. I mean, just floored when I heard the news about Buzz Williams going to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is an absolutely awful situation. It's probably the worst coaching job in the ACC. And they managed to get a high-end hire. And I think a couple of reasons why they were able to do it. Number one, the new athletic director there, Whit Babcock, and Buzz Williams have a past together. They've worked together in the past, and so there was a little familiarity there. The other thing is that Buzz was in a situation where the university president had just left, the athletic director had just left, so he was going to get a new administration all the way around. And as a coach, the last thing you want to do is be working for somebody who didn't hire you. And I think that program may have plateaued a little bit. He didn't make the NCAA tournament for the first time this year. And I think he felt like it was probably a good time to get out and start the clock over again. And then, of course, the other reason is the fact he's making $18 million over 7 years guaranteed. And so even if it doesn't work out at Virginia Tech, that's a heck of a retirement plan. So there's that. And I think that's going to be really good for the ACC and for Virginia Tech, especially since there is some talent there in the Wilson kid, Drew Wilson and Ben Amelogou and Joey Van Zegren. So, it's not that he's starting over from scratch. As far as today's Danny Manning hire, it's a hire that will definitely put Wake Forest in the news, in the headlines. It's a splashy hire because of Danny and the Miracles. He's got a name, but here's the thing. He's only been a head coach for 2 years. And while he got Tulsa to the NCAA tournament this year, his overall record is pretty pedestrian. It's just over 500. Now, he did coach as an assistant to Bill Self at Kansas for 9 years, and he did play in the NBA, and because of his name, he should be able to recruit. But this is not a slam dunk hire. This is one where the book is going to be out on this for a couple of years to see how Danny Manning handles this. And then here's the other thing, too. Is Danny Manning looking at this long-term, or is Danny Manning looking at this like he's now in a power conference? It's a chance to really, show what he can do and get his name out there and maybe use this as a stepping stone. So, if he has a couple of 3 good years, does he take off and take another more high-profile job? So this is one I keep an eye on. I like the hire in the sense that it really may, energize a fan base that really does need to come together and is kind of fractured right now. But I'm not necessarily sure that this is really the home run hire that they really needed right now. And it definitely is worth watching, and it's going to take a year or two really to kind of to get a grasp as to how good a hire this is.
Right, totally agree with that. And once again, this is Brett Friedlander on WSBF FM Clemson this afternoon. And before we wrap it up, we just want to say, who do you like in the Final Four this weekend, and who's your national champion? I guess, of all things, we may see an SEC national championship. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, and don't take that as meaning that the SEC is the best conference.
Well, yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
They've got 2 really good teams. Florida has been the best team all year and really should win this. They've got a coach who's won 2 national championships, and while they don't have a lot of NBA guys, they've got a really good concept. They play great defense. But here's the thing. My gut is telling me that UConn looks an awful lot like the team a couple of years ago when they got on Kemba Walker's back and said, let's go for a ride. Right now, Shabazz Napier is doing that with this team. And I've got a sneaky suspicion, and for no other reason but a gut feeling, that they're going to beat Florida tomorrow. And I look at Kentucky, and I see 6 NBA guys on that roster, and how all of a sudden they've decided to turn the switch. In January and February, it's like, oh, come on, let's get this over with and get to the real games. And now all of a sudden they are in the real games, and now they've got some confidence going, and they're really starting to play up to that potential. I'm thinking Kentucky wins this, and I'm thinking that Kentucky's going to be playing UConn in that final game, and I hope I'm wrong because I don't particularly care for Calipari and the way he does things. I'd like to see Florida win it because I think they're doing it right, but my gut is telling me it's going to be Kentucky.
Right, and then you can't help but feel good for Bo Ryan and Wisconsin. Him finally getting to a
absolutely
Final Four. He really does it. They really play hard, and that big guy in the middle really a player, and they really play as a team.
Yeah, I fear that Wisconsin is going to be in that situation where, we got here, we really accomplished something, and by the time they realize that they've got another game to play, they're going to be in a position where they're fighting from behind and are going to have trouble. I hope I'm wrong on that one too, because that would be a very cool story, Bo Ryan, cutting down the nets, but you kind of get that vibe about them that they're just glad to be there.
Right, and Brett, thanks again for coming on all year, and I guess we'll with basketball wrapping up, focusing on a little ACC baseball, and then looking ahead to spring football is what y'all be doing next.
Yeah, and there's There's a very, very big series getting ready to happen this weekend down there in Clemson.
Right.
NC State has lost 6 straight ACC games, and it's gotten to the point too where Carlos Rodon has got a 2.12 ERA, and yet he's 2-4. And to try to shake things up, Elliot Avent has moved him to Saturday this week, so he's not going to be pitching there today. He's going to be pitching there tomorrow, I guess, so that maybe he's not matched up against Clemson's ace. But it's a huge series, because NC State right now is, forget NCAA tournament, they're teetering on the brink of not getting into the ACC tournament, and they need to turn things around in a hurry. So that's definitely, if you're not doing anything and you're in the area there, you definitely want to.
Right. No, it should be a really, really good series. Really good series. But, yeah, Brett, just tell people where they can find you again, and we'll definitely have you back on, I guess, when, football rolls around. And in August, come August, it'll be here before you know it. But where can people find you?
On Twitter, @StarNewsACC. You can also find my blog on the Star News website, and that's starnewsonline.com. Just look for sports, click it, and all the blogs are on the left-hand side. I'm the ACC Insider.
All right, thanks, Brett. We appreciate it and enjoy the Final Four in North Texas, not Dallas. So.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. That's Brett Friedlander. Thanks to him for coming on all year. He's been gracious with his time, and we really appreciate him. And he's been great all year. So really got great news on the ACC and insight on it. So really appreciate him. And now we've got Phil Sykes coming on.